are a group of volunteers. These are doctors, lawyers, engineers, startups folks, retired citizens, teachers, who in our free time we collect surplus food from restaurants and give it to the less fortunate. I think that applies to everyone in the Robin Hood Army. So even it doesn't matter if someone's right, left, center. Like I'm like, if you're here to like serve more people, then this is the place for you. But everyone, including me, have to leave our political ideology outside. There are 194 million people in the country, documented UN data, who don't have 2 square meals a day. So now we're trying to like solve for that. I tried to solve for that personally myself when I was living abroad for 2 years. Didn't do a great job, because I was like balancing that with like 5 other things and like project management. But like now I'm excited about the folks who are dedicatedly focusing on that.
Okay, so I've been trying to get Neel to come and do this for a while, but he's been super busy because they run a massive thing on August 15th, and I think generally things have been busy at his end.
Watching the Cricket World Cup.
Okay. Well, if you're watching it and bringing good luck to the team, then you can continue watching the Cricket World Cup. But Neel runs an organization I'm assuming a lot of you have heard of called the Robin Hood Army. I don't know I hope some of you have volunteered for it over a period of time. But Neel happens to be one of my brother's closest friends, and I've known you since before RHA happened.
Yeah.
I think what I do remember of the journey is SRCC, followed by one of the earliest employees at Zomato, Harvard, and then Google, right? I think what I remember about Neel looking for his job at Google was to find a company that would allow him to build Robin Hood Army at the same time, right? And I think he has one of the most interesting LinkedIn or Twitter handles. It's Googler by the day and Robin by the night.
Yeah.
Robin by the night. So that's a little bit about Neel. The reason I wanted to have him was they have built an organization that defies the principles, in my view, of what an organization and how people behave, right? We'll get into scale and what RHA does, but RHA is one of the world's largest non-profit organizations, which has never raised a single rupee. Okay, it contributes to efforts across multiple countries with no branding, no sponsorship, no salaries. Neel doesn't take any money, neither do anyone else. So I think it's just like the thought of creating something at that scale and motivating people to operate and give so much to it with no financial rewards defies what we all commonly are taught and learned about things, right? And as we think about GRIP as an organization and we think about the different motivations that go into building something that is challenging, something that is difficult, learning from this is just incredible for all of us. Okay. Thank you, Neel, for coming. And if you can, in your words, describe how you think about RHA's mission.
Yeah.
And just talk a little bit about the scale that you guys operate at.
Sure. No, thanks for having me here. And I'd say like one big caveat is like I'll talk a bit about the Robin Hood Army, but it's the work of like hundreds and thousands of like volunteers are doing that. I have the privilege to kind of represent them on many platforms, but 95% of what I'm going to talk about is something which I'm not directly involved with, and it's something I take pride in, but like I'm representing the work, it's not my work, so to speak. What does the Robin Hood Army do, and like what is our scale? Very simple. We are a group of volunteers. These are doctors, lawyers, engineers, startups folks, retired citizens, teachers, who in our free time we collect surplus food from restaurants and give it to the less fortunate. So how that works is basically like it's a hyper-local model. So let's say Delhi at this point will be split up into approximately 29 different neighborhood chapters. So in let's say Green Park, the food will come from restaurants in Green Park, the volunteers will be residents of Green Park, and the less fortunate will be homeless people, orphanages, old age homes around Green Park. Now when it comes to like the vision or what are we trying to like really solve for, and maybe I'll talk about the scale first and then I'll talk about the vision. Scale is right now we have around 265,000 active Robins who do this in their free time. We've served around 135 million meals till date. We serve roughly anything between 1.7 and 2.5 million meals every single month. And we do this, we do across 403 cities. Interestingly, the fastest growing or the largest chapter of RHA is not in India, it's in Karachi in Pakistan. And that's another story or a case study in itself. Now, I think coming to the mission bit, what we realize is that while we're giving food to the less fortunate, it's less about the meals and it's more about the connection and it's more about like the conversations and getting to know them. It's like if I'm having a meal with any of you all, I'm going to try to get to know you and you're going to try to get to know me. And that's exactly what we're trying to like solve for. And through those moments, a lot of great things happen, right? Like a lot of trust is built when you're serving meals to people week on week, month on month. And then you can really understand like people's, like the things they face in their lives and how you can make a difference to them. So I find it less, I think of it less as a non-profit, I think of it less as a charity, and I think of it more like community building. So the mission statement has kind of become, how do we bring out the best of humanity using meals as a medium? There are many stories and anecdotes as to how did we come up with that? But it's like every meal is a conversation, and how do we give the regular people like you and me who want to make a difference in our free time that opportunity or platform to like help in any capacity.
Super, just incredible to think that it's 400 cities and 200,000 is probably larger than most organizations scale to from an size perspective. Talk to us about the first 20, 30, 40, 50 people, volunteers who came, right? I'm assuming those were friends and family. What did it take for them to get on the ground,
right,
and to start? Like I'm almost relating it to 0 to 1 of it. And I'm sorry, I'm corporatizing what is a very. It's almost like a journey of love and passion that RHA is. But if you were to think of that first 10, 20, what brought those people together?
So one of them happens to be Ashish Nikhil's brother, and he's my best friend from college. And I think what happened was like, so firstly, it's not an original idea. There's an organization called ReFood in Portugal, which does exactly the same thing. And at that point, I was setting up Zomato in Portugal, and we were relatively like bootstrapped. We didn't have like a lot of money to spend on marketing budget. So we used to partner with local credible organizations. And that's when I came across something like this which exists. And honestly, till then, I was like very like anyone in my early 20s, like just focused on my career and having a good time. Like it never really struck me that like I have to do something beyond like my trajectory. But I found this idea really obvious. Like if there's food which is being thrown away, it makes sense to give it to people who need it. So when coming back to the question, like first 15, 20 people, these were people who were friends, right? And people I know through school or college or work, or even for that matter, some restaurant owners who we knew through our network at Zomato. And I think the initial bit was, it started off as a weekend project, and like when we kind of like brought people together and we're like, like this is what we see in, like happening in another part of the world, and it might make sense here, so let's try it on a Sunday. So a few restaurants who we knew, they kind of volunteered to provide meals. So it was not excess meals initially, and they gave 150 meals, and we were a little unsure that will we find 150 people. And then when we went out looking for these folks to serve the meals to, we just realized that there were so many more. And that's why I think like that, it kind of like clicked that look like have to think of this more as a growth stage startup and less as a like NGO. And I think still today, like we still think of it as like in terms of a growth stage organization. But I think first 15, 20 people, regular folks like you and me, young professionals who were doing stuff like who wanted to do something along with their jobs. I think the most motivating part of the work is the work, right? When you're going and like serving people food and like you see them smile, like your day is made, right? And like at one point you realize you're doing it for you. And once you have that intellectual honesty that like like this is something which really works for me, then that kind of really like glues you and makes you do more. So I think initially what we did was gave a lot of responsibility to people at an early stage, and I think that was very motivating for people. So for example, like initially when I started the Robin Hood Army with a friend Anand actually, and then there were a few others who banded around us, uh, I handed over social media to, like I was looking after social media and I was looking after like the little bit we had in Delhi, and I handed over social media to Arushi, who's now my co-founder, and Delhi to this other girl, Suvarna, and I started setting up in different cities. And both these folks did a much better job than I did, right? And I think that's when I realized, like, look, like, our role is to kind of like keep finding people who are more suited for for this, and kind of keep decentralizing. So that became a big core of what we do. And I think another thing which happened is we were sharing a bit on social media because some folks were not really sure where the food was going. So we're like, okay, let's document it. People wearing green, going out and giving food. But then our friends and acquaintances and ex-colleagues, they started seeing it on social media. They're like, oh, tell us how to set up here, or let us know when you come to Bombay, let us know when you come to Calcutta. We started in Delhi, and I think that's why I'm very grateful for the person who started with me, Anand, because when these people started reaching out to us, we're like, do we wait till we get Delhi absolutely perfect, or do we kind of like get on a phone call or just like fly down for the weekend with like these are the best practices of doing a drive and just hand it over to, or ask someone to like set up in Bombay and Bangalore. And again, I'm so grateful we went for the latter option, because again these folks did a much better job than we did, in terms of like they started growing much faster than Delhi did. And I think that was again a very strong cultural lesson, that like look, like our job is not like to be the CEO or something. We are the custodians. Like we can share best practices, but we have to constantly keep finding the right people who can take it to another level. So the people who we kind of like started again like setting up cities were seasoned people who've like led businesses for like 2 decades, have had hundreds of employees under them. So obviously like they had a much better pulse on the ground than we ever did. But like what we did well was like just give them that clarity and make it very, very crisp, that like, look, these are the 4 things we need to do, and then do what you have to, except collect money. Like, and that's been one feature of the Robin Hood Army, that don't collect money in the name of the organization.
I love how you use the word custodians.
Yeah.
And I think you can apply those principles to business. But one of the things that can happen is losing control, right? And it doesn't take long for a federation to become a fiefdom, right? Almost, because everyone then has their own motivation.
Yeah.
Some people may be altruistic, but some people may say, hey, I wanted to be known as Mr. XYZ doing this.
Yeah.
How did you control, if I can say, culture, and that custodian of brand, tonality, even the feel of what you want to achieve? How did you control that despite growing so fast? Not having typical manager reporting structures. What was that ingredient?
Honestly, look, we're a bunch of like 20-somethings.
That's why it's so much more interesting.
So we were like figuring everything out on the fly. Like it's not like even right now, like when we're operating at scale, we're still figuring things out on the fly. So I don't think like we knew exactly what we were doing, but we knew the direction we wanted to like head. I think culture is critical at any phase of the organization, whether you're like 0 to 1, 1 to 100, post IPO, like it's what gets people up and gets them to work wherever they are. So I think firstly, it's a very decentralized organization, and that's one of the reasons why people put their heart and soul into it, because they don't think of it as, like the founder sitting in like Gurgaon or Boston or whatever. For them, it's their own baby, because no one's making a buck. So we're like, okay, we need to protect that. So we had 3 guardrails, like where like you can like innovate, you can do what you want. The 3 guardrails are like, you can't collect money in the name of the organization, you can't have any political affiliations, and you can't and you have to serve all religions. So you can't say that, oh, I'll serve this specific religion, not that. And I think that applies to everyone in the Robin Hood Army. So even it doesn't matter if someone's right, left, center. Like I'm like, if you're here to like serve more people, then this is the place for you. But everyone, including me, have to leave our political ideology outside before coming here. So I think that was like we saw a couple of fringe incidents, which is what prompted us to like kind of like keep it decentralized, but at the same time have these guardrails. And I think what started happening with time is, and obviously, like I'm telling you all the good things. Like when you grow in any organization, there are so many things which go wrong, so many conflicts, so many like when passionate people are coming together, there's obviously like arguments and conflict and all of that. So I think what happened was when there was like let's say conflict happening in a city, it would always invariably keep coming to Arushi, me, and later Sanchit, and we started playing more of a class monitor role, which after a point was not scalable, right? Because at one point, someone from like sitting in Cochin or Chennai or wherever, we're like, why do we need to listen to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, coming to your fiefdom
Yeah.
point. So, I think what happened was we kind of like had, like, we meet once a year where all the city heads come together and we kind of like decide what are goals for the year, what are our learnings, what are our mistakes. And the first time we met, we kind of like together co-built like some core parts of our culture. And what does that mean? So like we literally asked the question, it was like almost like a case discussion where we asked people like, what for you, what does it mean to be a Robin? And it was a proper whiteboarding session where we started taking points and we started seeing like who felt what and like what was the common consensus. And we came up with like some cultural norms and values, which are still our cultural norms and values. So, like, one thing was like, and it comes straight from the Indian Army, where like citizens first, Robins last. So, what that means when you're talking about freedom, let's say Nikhil and me are setting up the Robin Hood Army chapter in one part of like India, and we are arguing. Now, if you and me are arguing about something which relates to the people we are serving, that's a legit argument. We should discuss it out and debate for hours. For example, the quality of the food we are serving. But if you and me are arguing about like who should go like give an interview with Radio Mirchi, then we are kind of like setting ourselves up for mediocrity. Right? So, but citizens first determines that. So it's not like Neel is saying that, oh, like this is right and this is wrong. Is this a citizens first problem? If not, then let's not spend time on it. So similarly, there were other things which came up, which was like lead from the field. Like all answers will come on the field. Like think less, do more, which is like focus more on the execution. Like sometimes we get too caught up into strategy. So like let's not overthink like the end goal. Let's just like do that. So I think those things like kind of codifying it together helped us kind of break down those fiefdoms a bit. And we still, and right now it's a much larger organization, and we're still kind of continuously thinking that A, are those things still relevant today? And B, if they are, how do we consistently keep communicating it in a non-prescriptive way, but in a more like this is who we are way, and like does this make sense? So it's something which still keeps us up and we still haven't got it perfect.
No, that's I mean, organizations do believe in having values and codifying culture, but I think this is a great way to put it because commercial organizations have other things to keep things together, but at RHA this is probably the one single pillar that holds everything together, and if you've codified it so beautifully, it makes it almost objective.
Absolutely.
I think that two more questions coming out of this, right? One is, how do you deal with continuity? Right? I mean, it's simple operational problem. I am the RHA chapter head for Delhi. I have a relationship with X number of restaurants who I know will deliver food. This is where it happens. This is a supply chain. One day I decide, hey, I need to move on. I need to do something else. How do you codify organization structure and handle transition? Like, are those things that you guys have thought about?
No, it's a constant journey, and I think it's what probably keeps me up like most of the time. I think like one part of the cultural statement is next gen, and next gen basically stands for next generation.
Right.
And we're like, look, whatever you're doing, like within 6 to 12 months, make yourself replaceable and find someone else to kind of like do it. And this is at every level. So, and again, by theory, it's at every level. But like making sure it actually happens is another task altogether. But for example, like let's say when new Robins come for the first time and they have an induction or something, we tell them that look, 1 month from now, you'll be organizing a drive, right? So that just gets them much more alert, much more like looking at everything, also figuring out what are the gaps where they can add value. And what happens, a lot of them end up doing a much better job than the current folks, and they're the ones who you want to groom for future leadership. Similarly, like folks who are, we have like different structures. We have people like it's kind of like an Uber model when Uber used to launch. There's a city representative, there's a volunteer management representative who kind of looks after the whole volunteer experience. There's someone who onboards restaurants and someone who looks after social media, because that's one of our fundamental levers in getting more people to sign up. So each one of these also are like something which we like try to say that like look, it should be between 1 and 1.5 years, and then we figure out what next. And you have to groom the next generation of people.
So it is like effectively like almost like a career map for every Robin, and like a expectation of a very clear KRA, which is beyond just serving food, right?
Yeah.
Because it is an organization running as well, and as it adds up, you actually do have visibility to how that organization is functioning and growing.
As in, obviously, it's broken in parts.
Sure.
But like any large organization, but it's something like because I come from a large organization and I try to like see like what are the blind spots.
Sure.
I'm talking about even our level. Like, let's say I started the organization with someone, Anand, who was my colleague at Zomato, and then he was building his own startup, and kind of like life caught up with him, and he had the humility to say that okay, like maybe we should find who next after me. So I think that set a very strong precedent, that like as long as it's probably one of the two biggest passions in your life, and you're constantly adding value to what is happening, and not just like monitoring or like then you continue doing what you're doing. But if not, it's completely fine. Like for people, like life catches up, they might have kids, they might have a new business, they might have an illness in the family. And even for me, like earlier I feel I have my purpose, I feel like it's the best job in the world, but I'm like 3 years later, something happens in my life and I'm not the right person. I should be that, like put my hand up and say that, okay, there's enough people to like take over from this. What we started doing is also like getting a little more scientific about the way we are recruiting folks. So largely it's a very decentralized organization, but we have a core set of 50-60 people who are spread across different functions. Like there are folks who are in the growth and expansion team, who are like expanding RH into different cities and all of that. There's a tech and data team, which is like constantly like crunching numbers, building dashboards, looking at funnels as to like when are Robins like falling off. Then there is a social media and partnerships team, which kind of builds the top of the funnel, which is like partnerships with like media houses or tech companies, or maybe Uber giving rides and making sure that we either get more Robins or we get more food.
Sure.
But my point is, so there's these 50-60 people, and earlier it was like people who we worked with or we saw and we're like, oh, why don't you kind of like pick this up? But that also is limiting. I think when you have like 265,000 people, there's such great talent out there. And how do you figure out how? So what we try to do is try to slightly centralize those 50-60 people. And we've now been coming up with a process by which anyone, if they qualify for certain criteria, they can put their hand up and say, I want to be part of the growth team. Then they go through 3 rounds of conversations, 1 with the current growth team, 2 with like maybe someone from another country, and 3 with like one of the co-founders. And each of us are kind of trying to gauge different parts of like someone's gauging for like just experience, someone's gauging for problem solving abilities. I'll be gauging for like just culture and motivation. And so a lot of things which we learned or unlearned in like the build phase of Zomato, or like what we're building in Google Pay or Google Cloud, like these processes, systems, like we're trying to bring into the Robinhood Army. So like one example is when you hire someone, like in most cases you're expected to say a yes or a no. But that's not real life. Sometimes you just have a gut feeling, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And so there's this one thing I learned in Google which is called leaning higher, which is leaning yes. So now if I'm a leaning yes, I have to take a call. But if three people are going through that, then if only one person is a leaning yes, then we can talk it out. But if three people are leaning yes, then you know that something is off
That's right.
there. So I think like we keep trying to take these best practices and bringing it into making sure that the team is more and more relevant. And we're trying to move from a very ops/leadership dependent team into more like a team of specialists, people who are best in class in product or marketing or even ops, and try to bring them into the system and like give them the challenges we're facing.
I think it's, while you've answered the question, I think it's also very interesting to take away that you've also rethought the organization every few years.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And thank God for that, right?
Because probably a few months.
Every few months. Because if you did not,
Yeah.
it just wouldn't scale.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. And maybe it's very interesting that you all have active jobs.
Yeah.
And you're bringing best practices from some of the largest global companies into this.
Yeah.
Hearing all of this, I think one of the questions that a lot of people have is that you're in Google. For people who don't know, Neel is you're married, and you have this, right?
Yeah.
How do you do it personally? How do you allocate time? And I can tell you that this is one of the most common conversations that we have as a company, right? Or at an individual level.
Yeah.
How do you allocate time? But this is 2 full jobs.
Yeah.
And then personal life.
Yeah, I'm always dropping the ball in one of the three.
So it's not a great answer.
Yeah. Oh, so that's that. Like, but as long as you get at peace with dropping the ball, then I think with something like it's fine. But I think what I've done is like just compartmentalize my life more and more. So I wouldn't have been able to build the Robin Hood Army with building my own startup, because I feel like it's not about number of hours, but it's about like you have to be obsessed about thinking about one thing all the time. So I think like I kind of like simulated an environment for myself where I'm like, okay, even though I really love the idea of building a startup or I love being part of a growth organization, I'm like that part of my life is not going to be compatible with building the Robin Hood Army.
Sure.
I married an incredible friend who puts up with my bullshit. So I think that's also like it's very important like who is your life partner and whether they get you for the most part and whether you get them in their own way. So I think that's the second part. The third part is I think like after a point you realize it's not number of hours, but it's about like leverage. Like are you leveraging right in those hours? So for me like let's say I have an APAC role in Google, so my days start really early at like 7:30 in the morning. But then because of that, I can get done by 4:35, right? And then after that, like my weekday nights and my weekends are kind of like doing different things in the Robin Hood Army. A lot of it, probably 50% of it, is recruiting people who are smarter than us and trying to get them into like tell them that this is the best thing you can do with your time. And a lot of that is also kind of like working with the teams, trying to understand what's happening on the field and trying to constantly like think how we can get better. And again, like these are calls where like the decisions are coming from the team. They're not from me. I'm just like bouncing off things. So I think the more I make myself dispensable to what's happening and the more I think about what next, the better it is for everyone. Right? So even if one day I just decide not to do it, like the work and the service continues. I also have started attributing a lot of importance to just nothing time. And like earlier it was more like, okay, let's be productive, let's listen to a podcast, let's go for a run. And I play squash with Ashish like once a week. I go for runs, I look after that. But I'm like, if I'm watching like some 1980 test highlights and it's giving me joy, I'm not going to take like load about, oh, this is not productive.
Sure.
Because it's putting me in a happy space. So I feel like as long as I'm doing these three things or being around people who give me good energy, like I can balance things out. But the second like I'm doing something for the sake of doing it, or the second I'm doing something where like, it's a family commitment, so I have to go because of it, then I think like things get, so it's important to like ruthlessly prioritize and also be very empathetic with the people around you and tell them why you're prioritizing it. So I think that's kind of like been the modus operandi. If anything, it's become easier.
Sure.
You know, I think like earlier it was like I think I'm putting less hours to the Robin Hood Army, but much more quality hours. And I also try to spend a fair amount of time on the field, because most times like you might have your thought processes, this is what works, that was works, but you really know what's happening when you're on the field with the team serving people. And that's also the best part of the job, right? Like I think when you're out like playing with kids who you're serving and all that, then you kind of like just switch off. It's therapy in its own way. And then like the things in life which generally stress you out, like a job change or instability or a promotion or whatever, or like cat exam, you don't care much about those things because you're like,
Yeah.
look, life is much simpler than you make it out to be in your head.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Last question on my side,
Yeah,
and we'll
yeah.
go to this. Everything you spoke to us about, I think if there is an example of maybe a situation which has been really tough
Yeah.
at Robin Hood, right?
Yeah.
And where a lot of this has maybe been questioned, challenged, and then, but because it existed, it all protected it. Anything that you can make it really real with some kind of an example?
So I think like when we launched when we launched and we were growing in Pakistan, got a lot of flack from like many parts of the country saying that, oh, like, but why do we need to be there? And what is the necessity? And then like that chapter grew faster than any of us. So like there in Pakistan, if there's if a restaurant has a Robin Hood Army sticker, people are more likely to go and eat there.
Oh, really?
So now it makes more business sense for people to give food to us, which is the best possible motivation. And so through performance, they've kind of won hearts. And like it comes to a point where I'm like, it doesn't matter like what the politics or the religion part of it. It's just like if someone's hungry and you can help them and you can make a difference to their lives. So I think navigating that and like communicating empathetically, because obviously everyone has their own conditioning, and I also come from a lot of privilege to like not be conditioned like that. So just being mindful about that, that has been a journey and continues being a journey. You know, there are a lot of people who now, because the organization is relatively large, will join for purely political reasons. Oh, like I literally have a vote bank here. So that's something which we have to constantly navigate and figure out. Like proactively, how do we solve for it? Like when you're reactively solving for something, it's just much more energy, much more effort. Another thing which has been top of mind is like we've had a few cases where women Robins in certain parts have felt uncomfortable because again like there's been some creeps who've joined just to like not serve people but like meet women, and it is what it is. So there also like we've kind of like had to then firstly we were trying to reactively solve for it, but then we've got something called a WeCare system where like each one of these 400 cities has a woman Robin who's the WeCare rep, and if anyone feels even remotely uncomfortable, like that person has a WeCare rep to go to, and she has a whole modus operandi as to like how to solve for it. So, and if you notice, all these 3-4 things are nothing to do with the people we are serving, right?
Yeah.
And so, to a certain extent, sometimes we question ourselves, just like, what are we doing, and like, why are we doing it? But then when you see the impact, right? And like, I've talked about the impact in terms of numbers, but I think it's the smaller incidents are the real ones. So, for example, like in Pune, there's a doctor called Dr. Sunavne, and he's been a Robin for like a few years, and he realized that a lot of people he's serving have in that cluster have failing eyesight, and this happened a few years back. So what he did was he convinced the hospital he works in, their owners, to and he realized that it's a simple like cataract surgeries, that's all they require, to like look after to sponsor 50 surgeries. So then we went, and because these families we've been serving them for weeks and months, they kind of like trusted us. We told them we take care of the pre-care, post-care. Now out of those 50 people who got surgeries, 48 people improved their eyesight, and 2 people who were blind started seeing again.
Oh wow.
For me, that's impact, right? It's not the millions, it's not
Yeah.
like the case studies, it's not like we're like
Real
looking at
tangible impact.
Yeah, but I'm like, but it takes many months of serving food to get that level of trust where you can make that difference. I think another big win was like convincing lakhs of people across the country and partnering with the government and setting up camps for vaccination during the Delta wave and after that. Because again, like a lot of Robins who are also cops said that when we went as cops in like places like UP and all, like people like, yeah, we don't want to do it, and there's certain communities who are vaccine hesitant. But when like the same cop wore a green T-shirt and went there, the Robin T-shirt, they're like, oh, like these guys must be looking out for us, so it must be right. So I feel like still very early days, and like there's a lot of bullshit which happens which you kind of like need to zoom out of, which is like the HR things we're talking about. But as long as you have visibility to like the impact which is happening through the meals, and like just empowering regular people to make a difference, and that's motivating enough, and that kind of like keeps all of us going and wanting to do more.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the effort of that of all that HR,
Yeah,
multiplies the output that
Yeah,
you're getting
yeah.
out. I think it's a necessary evil.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guys, I don't. You'll take the question on the chat if there are any. But please feel free to ask questions.
No, no, absolutely. I think like spot on. Like we're like just to put numbers into it, we're barely scratching the surface. So like we talked about like serving 1.7 to 2.5 million people a month. There are 194 million people in the country, documented UN data, who don't have 2 square meals a day. Across the world, that's around 795 million. In the country, around like 7,000 people die of hunger every single day. Not hunger, malnutrition. So hunger related. 3,000 of them are children, right? And even out of these 795, 85 to 90% are South Asia, Western Sub-Saharan Africa, and some parts of Latin America, right? So I think for us, like those are the two things which like we're focusing on. One is, and this is something which we did in Independence Day this time, where we're like, how do we, sitting in the cities, set up ecosystems for serving people where the malnourishment is the most, which is rural parts of the country. So what we did in Independence Day, we did something called Mission Swadesh, where each one of these cities, we adopted 5 villages within a 30-kilometer radius where the need is the most. And generally we have food partners and we have Robins and we have media partners, but we started a third degree of partnership with logistics partners. And what we did is like we identified places where like we see relatively high levels of malnourishment, and we took them rations for like the next few weeks. So now what we're trying to do is like we had I think I don't remember the exact number for that. It was more than 1,000 villages. But out of that, even if like 150 to 200, we can serve on a monthly basis and take them rations for the next month. That itself is like kind of like addressing that non-addressed TAM, so to speak. The other part is like pulling out some of like our best like folks who kind of like set up RHA across like India. They set up like something called the Academy, where we're teaching kids and getting them enrolled into local government schools. And we've kind of pulled them out and made a SWAT team to like go deeper into like the parts of the, like we're big in India and Pakistan, relatively big, but like again Indonesia, Thailand, Bangladesh, Uganda, like there we're barely scratching the surface. So like how do we like really create like great like centers of excellence there of serving, and more than anything find the right driven people, like people who are smart, people who have a lot of experience, but people who really want to make a difference to their country, in not necessarily like getting into politics, but like they want to make a difference. So now we're trying to like solve for that. I tried to solve for that personally myself when I was living abroad for 2 years. Didn't do a great job, because I was like balancing that with like 5 other things and like project management. But like now I'm excited about the folks who are dedicatedly focusing on that. So I think those are the three levers would be rural, getting into like more countries, and focusing on our education wing, which is the Robinhood Academy, which is kind of like a career launcher where career launcher takes you and puts you into a MBA school. We take the kids who are not going to school in the families we serve and make sure that they have enough education and their Aadhaar cards, etc., and put them into local government schools for the first time. So I think those are the 3 levers we are focusing on in the medium term. So in a weird way, the best stories of RHA are the non-food related ones. The like the real impact, like the cataract surgery. Then like even when this Odisha train accident happened in Balasore, within 45 minutes, we had 70 Robins who were there, and they transported 382 people from the trains uh, into the hospitals. I don't know how many of them we managed to save ultimately, but what we realized is that we have the power. The power of this is that we have like networks of people in every community across the country, and we can activate them during any crisis quickly, right? But having said that, like while there'll be like disaster management is there, there's education, there's vaccination camps, food is the common currency, because you can only do all of that and you can only help the community if the community trusts you, right? And so like food is the metric which we're constantly looking at. Are we growing? Are we doing the right leverage partnerships? But through that, it enables a lot of these fringe activities, which is essentially like bringing out the best of humanity.
I think it also sort of, and probably wrong time to be saying this phrase, elevates the consciousness of the Robins.
Yeah.
Like when you're in that place of giving food, your awareness increases.
Yeah.
And then when the next time the
100%.
call comes,
100%.
you're there to say it.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was just like it's quite funny. But the real answer to this is that in Zomato for like 2-3 years, my role was to take Zomato into new countries. So I think that was a muscle which I kind of like built over time with a lot of mistakes. And something I realized in Zomato also, like this is we're talking about 2014, 15, 16. The more we grew global, and probably it's like 70% of it didn't work out with time, but the more evangelism, pride, and like really strong performance was there in the local teams. But they're like we're part of something which is much bigger than us, right? So I feel like that I've also seen that happen. Like in RHA, like Pakistan is one success story. There are a lot of like stories which didn't succeed, but just the pride which comes with being part of like a organization which is like spread across like different countries, that brings the credibility it brings with partners who like help us grow. I think that is something which like is the side benefit. I didn't really think about it when we first went global, but I've realized that makes a big difference to the internal motivation of all the stakeholders of the Robin Hood Army, so to speak. Yeah, I'm not naturally a big company person. Like now, but the interesting thing is now I'm learning a lot. Because before this everything was very like 0 to 1 in my life. I'm like, let's use common sense and let's figure it out. But now I see like how like someone thinks about building an organization like 5 years ahead, and like it's not like I'm the decision maker in Google for that, but I'm like it's like a kind of business school education in itself for me. But I think coming to your first challenge, I think like the one big challenge is retention of Robins. Like any other B2C company, because what happens is, as you said, like life catches up, right? Like and like people like they do it very passionately for a bit, or they sign up and then they don't get the experience they want, and then we have a leaky bucket. So we're trying to solve it through tech and through operations, and that's a very interesting like I was having a very interesting conversation with which led to like great like something really amazing being built by the Zeroda team. So I was talking to Kailash, the CTO, and he's like, okay, what's a challenge? And I'm like, look, like the number of people we serve is directly correlated to the number of Robins. Is directly correlated to the number of Robins, and the number of Robins is directly correlated to staying the quality of leadership. Now, when I have like 20 or 30 cities, I can somewhat have a sense of like how is the leadership like growing and all. Now, 300 cities, what can I even do, right? And that's something where like because it's so much of a black box, I'm like, that makes me really uncomfortable. So then he, and really brilliant guy and clear thinker. So he started talking about like generally Zerodha's philosophy of how like for them like they don't spend anything on marketing. Uh, their basic thing is like, if we can make our users great investors, they will stay with us, they will make more money, and eventually that means we'll make more money. So a lot of their product is geared towards, and this is, I'm sure, like Grip also like has actively been following them and their journey and doing a lot yourself. What you're also trying to do is very transformational, like democratizing the way people think about investments. But they focus a lot on education. So it's like if someone's investing in a penny stock, they'll probably get a nudge saying that, oh, by the way, 94% of people made a loss investing in such a stock. They also gamify it, right? So if they have something called a 60-day challenge. So if someone does not make a loss for like 60 days in a row, like active traders, then they get a simple PDF certificate which is signed by Nitin Kamath. People are damn proud of it. They share it on LinkedIn and saying, oh, I'm at the 60-day challenge. There's some Guju uncles who like put it up in their offices in Bombay and all of that. So based on that, we came up with something called the check-in tool in the Robinhood Army, which is there. Like if you go on checkin.robinhoodarmy.com, which Kailash and his team built out. So there what happens is like when people go for a food drive, they take a selfie and they check in. And they can check in once a day. When they do 10 check-ins, they become a ninja. When they do 50 check-ins, they become a gladiator. When they do 200 check-ins, they become a centurion. So think of a Robin who's like done 60 check-ins, getting bored with it, or just like got an interesting date to go to. But then they see that there are only 3 other centurions in India. So they're like, no, I have to go and do more drives. So that's really like, and then you can kind of get to see what's happening in different parts of the Robinhood Army, not just in your city. So you're kind of like trying to take away that motivation to go back on the field from just 2 individuals who are leading, or for that matter, a co-founder, and making it more technologically driven. So I think that's one way we're trying to solve for it. But again, like very, very like work in progress. Like one thing I realized with like solving things through technology, you have to back it up with the right offline operations. Like sometimes even like I'm sure we've seen it in different companies. You come up with the best tech and the best thing, but if like people are not going to use it, what's the point? So like you really have to like have a very like remember like I think when we were in college, when the metro first started, and people didn't know how to go in and come out, right? So like for almost 1 year there were people in front of every door who would say, oh, you come in from here and you go out from here, right? Until it became a habit. So I think use that same analogy for like the systems we launched. Like just launching the system is not enough. You need those folks who are in front of the metro doors, who are getting people in and going.
You need to create that user flow, right? I mean, leaderboards, gamify. You need to do all those things.
But it's very manual. Like any great tech has to be backed up with very manual stuff. Like I think that. Yeah, 100%. That's why I'm on Google. So I spent 3.5 years in Google Pay. Our team was looking after the monetization of Google Pay. We had a lot of like partners. So I got to know about Zerodha through Google. I got to like do business with Uber through Google, and Uber gives like rides worth $1 million to the RHA every year. Then a lot, like we did this thing in one Independence Day where Google had for every time someone does an action, a meal is served, and they routed that meal through the Robinhood Army. So we kind of like actually mobilized almost 5 million meals through Google. Now we're figuring out with Google and Compass Group, who gives food to Googlers across the world. How do we kind of like divert that waste to people? So that's kind of an ongoing process. There's also access to a lot of like talented people who want to make a difference. So that's also like something which is really like it's been a leverage point. Like there's a time in my life where I've like I think post like let's say Zomato IPO, where I was like, okay, cool, I can do the Robinhood Army for a few years and maybe do it full time. But I think like in every conversation I go to with a partner, with a stakeholder, whatever, there is X more amount of credibility me having my own corporate career path also, or my own, and that combination gives a lot of leverage. I think the honest answer is we are thinking about it, but we're not doing a lot yet. With respect to like what you're saying, ki we have access to so much data while serving. How can we kind of make that a thing? Right now, the focus on data is more about uh, how do we keep activity going. So like through the gamification we talked about with Zerodha, through now we've kind of like open source data for every city. So if you go to, anyone can go to this robinhoodami.com/city/city name Delhi, you'll see all the data points they have and how many people are signing up, how many meals they're serving every month, how many kids are going to school for the first time, like what, like, and all the trends, and like people can, so we are using it more right now from a benchmarking/gamification point, but I feel the 2.0 will be how can we use it from a serving point of view, that like where is the real need, and like how do we kind of like feed into like everyone does not need to reinvent the wheel, like and by everyone I mean not only like the people we serve, like can also be helped by other NGOs who are like specializing in healthcare or something else. So that I'm actually trying to like hire the right person to like solve for that. Like I'm pretty sure I don't have the capability of solving for it. But again, like as I said, one part of what I'm constantly doing is just trying to like recruit people who are specialists in their fields, and one being data, and then trying to like give them problem statements to solve for.
I'd love to wrap up these sessions by trying to bring what we should take away as a company, and just lots of learnings, and hopefully I capture most of them. But I think from my perspective, one is the fact that you guys codified culture so brilliantly, and even that single pillar made sense for the organization. Number two is the concept of that decentralization, right? And being able to create a lot of people who could take independent decisions, because that increases speed of growth. The third one to me was this ability to see that there should be someone better than me. I need to train, I need to make myself replaceable and redundant, and then move up, right? Move up or move somewhere else to make that change happen. I think I would also credit you for marketing. We didn't talk about it, but I think just like you see a LinkedIn post on RHA, I think it's brilliant, right? You immediately associate yourself with the vision, and connecting this desire for human need and actually identifying it to a tangible problem of food. When you said it at the beginning, I actually didn't get it. Okay, but when you connected all of it together, I think you understand where the bigger purpose is coming. But I mean, just incredible takeaways for us. Thank you so much for being generous with your time and breaking it down. Thank you.
Of course, like very very exciting phase in Grip's journey also right now. Like I've been actively following it, and all I can say is like this phase of like is the best, most fun phase of building a company. After that, it just get more and more corporatized, which is a good thing. But like really like enjoy it, and really excited to see what lies ahead. We're always thinking about what else to do beyond mutual funds and FDs and things which we can understand in very palatable ways. So really excited to see like what you are doing with that, and also in the electronic space, like the EV space.
No, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Okay, guys, if you have other questions that we could answer, we'll try to get it. So just ping us and we'll solve for it. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Investments in debt securities are subject to risks. Read all the offer related documents carefully.